Hey guys, my name is Morgan Frost. I'm a junior majoring in psychology. And this semester I conducted and analyzed research with Dr. McDonald and made a presentation to demonstrate our findings. So I'm kind of just going to go over the introduction and give an overview of what we've been working on this semester. So Dr. McDonald and I looked at different eating factors and behaviors and how that relates to anxiety in students. So one purpose of the study was to make the connection between eating and how much it affects one's life. It can affect different areas such as mental health, anxiety and stress levels, and can be an examination of one's coping mechanisms. Eating behaviors are something that affects everyone every single day. So it may not be the same for every single person, but the eating behaviors are prevalent of everyone's everyday life, Different factors such as anxiety, emotional responses, and self-image play a part in how one's eating behaviors form. So if one is super anxious and turns to food to cope with that anxiety, that can just be an example of how their eating behaviors may form and affect their lives. So state anxiety specifically affects different eating behavior factors and patterns. State anxiety is that anxiety that you feel in the moment or a situation. So there are different aspects of eating behavior factors, such as cognitive restraint, emotional eating, and uncontrolled eating that have different effects on people. Eating behaviors play a huge part in someone's health. They can lead to someone being malnourished, overnourished, or even eventually developing an eating disorder. So looking at our research, we hypothesized three things. One, that state anxiety would be negatively related to cognitive restraint. Two, that state anxiety would be positive related to emotional eating. And three, that state anxiety would be positive related to uncontrolled eating. And then so we looked at a couple of extra factors in an exploratory analysis. And we looked at perceived stress and state anxiety, and also the relationship between perceived stress and the three different eating factors. And we didn't have any set hypotheses about these. These were just additional things that we wanted to examine during our study. So kind of just giving some demographics of our participants in this study. So we had 140 students from here in ISU that participated with an average of about 80% females and 20% males. And there was a prominent 70% of them being white or Caucasian, with 14 identifying as Hispanic Latino, 3% African American, and a 13% other. And so that's just kind of a background of what our participants' demographics look like. And so the measures that we used to look at this study, so the first one was the 3-factor eating questionnaire. So this questionnaire is a self-assessment of eating behaviors with a focus on cognitive restraint, emotional eating, and uncontrolled eating. The next one we used was the STAI, which was the State Anxiety Inventory. And it's a measurement of both state and trait anxiety that uses the Likert scale. And then the last one that we used was the PSS scale. So the Perceived Stress Scale was an assessment that measured stress levels in different scenarios based on the past month within someone's life. So the procedures are kind of how we just went about our study. The study was part of a larger data collection effort for a research methods course. Participants were directed through the SONA online scheduling system to a link on the survey on Qualitrix, which is where they took it. And there were several measures, including the 3 pertaining to the study, all administered online, and the order was counterbalanced. And the demographic questions were presented at the end of the study after all the anxiety and eating behavior questions were asked. So our results. So to test our hypotheses, 3 Pearson R correlations were conducted between the 3 factors of eating and reported on the TFEQ and STAI scales. So significant positive correlations were found between cognitive restraint and state anxiety, as well as emotional eating and state anxiety, and between uncontrolled eating and state anxiety. And originally made hypotheses that there would be a negative correlation to cognitive restraint and a positive to emotional eating and uncontrolled eating, but a positive correlation was found between all 3 different factors. So, and then going back to our exploratory analysis, so although no specific hypotheses or predictions were made, this analysis was conducted to determine the relationship between perceived stress and the 3 factors of eating, as well as with the state anxiety. So there was a strong positive correlation between perceived stress and state anxiety, and the only significant correlation that we found was between the 3 eating factors, and perceived stress was for the uncontrolled eating factor. And then these graphs right here are just kind of like visual representations of our data. It can conclude, so can chart back to our hypotheses. So contrary to what we had predicted, all 3 of the eating behavior factors had a positive correlation when we had hypotheses that 2 of them would, and the first one would have a negative correlation. State anxiety may predict that people are more constrained in their eating and not the opposite. We did not measure if participants had anxiety about their eating or their weight, and so we can just assume that increased state anxiety makes people more restrained in their eating, or at least makes them think that they are. Perceived stress has a strong relationship with state anxiety and is a better predictor of uncontrolled eating than state anxiety at the moment that it was collected. So state anxiety is a better predictor of the cognitive restraint eating and emotional eating. So kind of just some future things that we could look at or future directions that the research could take would just be collecting data on trait anxiety as well, and collecting data on state anxiety at more than just one time point during the duration of the study. So that is it.